Traditionally in the car industry 10, 15, 20 years ago, manufacturers relied almost exclusively on advertising to tell the public of the merits of their cars. Nowadays, automobile journalism has become a major force in this field.
Motoring 93 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.
Welcome to Motoring 93. You know, I suppose the biggest purchase any of us make in a lifetime is a house and a car. Now, with a house, you find one you like, check it out, and move in and hope for the best. We don't get a chance to live in it for a little while to make sure we really do like it. Now, with a car, that's different. We get to test drive automobiles. But let's face it, with so many models on the market, it's impossible to test drive them all. But if you're an automotive journalist, that's all you do every day is drive cars. So today, more than ever before, consumers are relying on what the experts have to say. Well, this week we're in Shannonville, Ontario, and gathered here are journalists from across the country. And joining them are car manufacturers, and they brought along the keys to all their 1993 models.
Well, these are the testing days for the Car of the Year Awards, which is an event put on every year by the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada. And what you see here is 47 different vehicles entered in 7 different categories for awards. And we've got about, I'd say about 54 journalists from all over Canada. And they are taking these vehicles in sequence. They're subjecting them to testing on the fast track here and the handling track, taking them out on the road. We have an off-road circuit over there as well for the four-wheel drive vehicles. And then they are evaluating them and scoring them on a 10-point system. Those scores will then be collated and handled by Ernst & Young, and will determine which is the best family car, which is the best economy car, performance car, and so on for 93. I think the public is using the information that's provided to help them at least winnow out various options and arrive at some kind of a conclusion before they go into the showroom.
There is something missing from this year's AJAC event here in Shannonville, Ontario, and that something is General Motors. General Motors, which represents 30% of the market, has decided not to participate. And what that means is that General Motors will not be on the ballot when the vote is cast for the best cars of 1993.
Well, it was a disappointment because they were going to be introducing the successor to the Camaro Firebird, the F car, and unfortunately it's not ready, which meant that the vehicles that they did have were basically vehicles we've seen before with some upgrades. For example, the North Star engine in the Seville and the Alante. It may be that they felt that the involvement coming out here was possibly not worth the effort this year. I mean, every year we don't have every manufacturer. It depends whether they have vehicles that they really want to promote or whether they've got something brand new.
If we were to list the concerns, it'd probably be 3 of them. One is the timing of the event. We think it should probably be delayed a little bit, perhaps into the spring, because that would give the journalists more time to experience the vehicles before they come to Shannonville. That would be one. 2 would be the evaluation process itself. We'd like to see it a little bit more objective, quantifiable. We don't think that the current process does that right now. And I guess the third major concern would be the journalists that ballot on the vehicles, and we suspect what we would like to see is that the journalists be qualified a little bit more than they are so right now. I think that AJAC has grown from around 20 members about a year and a half to 2 years ago up to about 100, which is great. I mean, any organization should have that kind of growth. It's healthy, it makes for a successful organization, but what's happening right now is that some of the journalists are just beginning to get the skills, the abilities, and the knowledge to complete thorough evaluations of vehicles. And we'd like to see standards set so that when they cast a ballot, they're casting it based upon the good, valid information.
I think General Motors is lost out by not being here. GM is a company in transition at the moment. They're really trying to gather themselves up and get themselves pointed in the right direction. I think by not being here, they've obviously detracted from the event, from the Car of the Year awards program. To be perfectly honest, they're in a sort of in-between year model-wise, and they probably, to be quite frank, probably wouldn't have won anything this year. Perhaps with the Seville STS with the new North Star engine. But they didn't have a strong new product program this year.
Well, you know, regardless of what anybody thinks of their automobiles, I think it's a great shame that the #1 automobile manufacturer in the world isn't present. I mean, it has to affect the overall standard of what comes out of it. You know, somebody winning an award is winning it when the largest car company in the world is not participating. So I think all round, everybody is a loser.
The consumer too, or not?
Very much so, because, you know, how can you give a car an award when it hasn't been up against a GM product? You know, especially in the luxury segment. You know, the new Seville STS with the North Star engine. What a wonderful car. That would give the Lincoln Mark 8 a run for its money.
We agonized over the decision, quite honestly, but it wasn't because we felt there were any sour grapes or because we hadn't won anything. That wasn't the case at all. We looked at the process, and we had some fundamental concerns about the validity of the process, whether it was a credible exercise or not. And frankly, we thought, because of the reasons I just spoke about, that it wasn't really valid.
We're sorry to see that General Motors declined to participate up here, because they have some very good product that's eligible this year, and they're always strong competitors in all phases of the market. They're one of the only other full-line manufacturers that Ford faces head-to-head in Canada. And yes, it creates an opportunity for Ford. It creates an opportunity for anyone else, and we try to take best advantage of that, but we hadn't really changed our strategy in coming to Shannonville with more cars or more people or different cars because of the General Motors decisions.
I think what they have lost is the ability to reach the group of people here. This is a pretty representative group of journalists from across Canada, and they've lost an opportunity to wave the flag a bit and keep the corporate banner flying and show us, you know, the improvements they've made in their existing product. And so I regret the fact that they're not here. I think they've lost and we've lost, and it perhaps detracts a bit from the Car of the Year awards too. So it's, you know, I'd like to see them back next year.
What will get General Motors back involved with the Car of the Year?
The best answer to that is that it become a valid process. We believe in the process. We think that there is value to a title called Car of the Year, but it has to be credible, and we'd love to work with the AJAC executive, with the other auto manufacturers, to make sure that it is a consistent and valid process. I'm sure we'd love to be a part of it.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
Behind me is the 1993 Toyota Corolla, the subject of this week's test drive. Now, in the past, the Corolla has been a perennial winner. The question is, will this new model continue the tradition? The new 93 Corolla offers a choice of two engines, a significantly upgraded 1.6-litre 4 that produces 105 horses, and a new, larger 1.8-litre unit. Our test car featured the larger 1.8-litre 4. To attain the larger displacement, Toyota simply stroked the 1.6-litre engine. Power is rated at a very usable 115 horses and 115 pounds-feet of torque. The big advantage being that maximum torque is generated at 2,800 RPM. The result is lots of low-end pull. Nudge the gas pedal and the response is almost immediate. In the old Corolla, you had to wind the engine up well into the rev range to achieve the same sort of response. To reduce the level of noise and vibration, Toyota have added a cast aluminum oil pan and some fancy fluid-filled engine mounts. The resulting reduction in the amount of engine noise and vibration passed on through to the passenger compartment is significant, to say the least. In fact, I think they've done a better job in the Corolla than they did in the Camry. Our tester came with a 5-speed manual transmission. No big deal, except that the car is capable of pulling 100 km in second gear, a great choice of gear ratios. The resulting 0 to 100 km/h time is more than respectable for a vehicle in this class. For the record, we required just 8 seconds to eclipse the 100k mark, and yet managed better than 32 miles per gallon or 8.8 litres per 100 kilometres during a 1000k test. We're going to look at the one low and the other highs of the dashboard. Now, the low point is the fact that the turn signal and high beam indicator lights are hidden by the steering wheel rim when you've got the steering wheel set in the right position. The highs are the dashboard is very clean, uncluttered and analog in design. The other thing, they've canted the heater and radio controls towards the driver to put them within easy reach, and they've also given the radio the priority. Now, why is that important? Because 9 drivers out of 10 use the radio far more frequently than they do the heater controls, and therefore mounting them that way makes a great deal of sense to me. The Corolla features an upgraded version of last year's suspension setup. McPherson struts at each corner and sway bars both back and front. Much of the upgrading found in the new Corolla was pinched from the Camry. The result is very pleasing for a compact econobox. During the pylon test, the car zipped through the course very well. I noted only mild understeer and some minimal body roll. The choice of Michelin XGT 4s as standard rubber certainly did not hurt the cause. These tyres offer superb traction without being overly noisy. Out on the open road, the Corolla offers a congenial ride, keeping the intrusion of road irregularities to a minimum. The new Corolla is bigger in every area. As well as being longer, wider and taller, Toyota inserted 1.5 inches into the wheelbase, meaning more comfort and room for all. The trunk even benefits from the larger dimensions. It is spacious, nicely shaped and features a low liftover. To add the required versatility, you can fold either or both halves of the split folding rear seat down. They can, however, be locked in the upright position to preserve trunk security. Up front, the seats are nicely contoured, offering a high degree of comfort, and to improve the driver's lot in life, the seat base can be adjusted for angle. The rear environment of this Corolla has been very well designed. Now, what I've done, I've set the driver's seat to where I would normally use it. And as you can see, there's more than enough legroom for me, and there's also plenty of headroom. Width-wise, there's ample room for 2 passengers. 3 might find it a little bit of a squeeze. In the safety arena, a driver's side airbag is standard, as are adjustable seatbelt anchors and child-proof rear door locks. Anti-lock brakes are available, an option worth every cent. The brake system is comprised of front discs and rear drums. During the brake test, I required 118 feet to stop from 80k. The pedal is easy to modulate, meaning it's easy to find the threshold. Now, the threshold is the point at which you attain maximum brake effort without locking the wheels. Having said all of that, the aforementioned anti-lock option is one I would make sure you order if a Corolla is in your future car plans. The answer to the question I posed off the top is yes, this Corolla is as good as any produced in the past. In fact, it surpasses all of them. That means the winning tradition will continue. Having said that, I found the $18,500 price tag a rather large pill to swallow, especially when you consider that if you add anti-lock brakes, power locks and windows to this car, you're going to skyrocket over $20,000. Next week on Test Drive, we look at the 1993 Infiniti G20.
You're looking at one of the most exciting automobiles to come out in years. It is the Dodge Viper, 488 cubic inches and 400 horsepower. It may look like a car that costs about $125,000, but it's $60,000 Canadian. About $3,000 will be made in North America in '93, with about 200 available in this country. Now, I know one man who is already breaking out in a sweat after looking at this engine, and that, of course, is our favorite mechanic, Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, I don't know about getting in a cold sweat over a Viper, but I'll tell you, it's kind of cold in the shop here today, and I'm definitely not sweating, so maybe that's what you were talking about. In any case, my topic for today is spark plugs and some of the tools and tricks that you want to know in order to replace them. Now, one of the first things that you should be aware of is that there's a lot of grit and gravel swirling around in the engine bay of today's cars. And the first thing that you want to do before you try and replace or remove spark plugs is blow out some of that grit that gets in around those spark plug threads, because you don't want it going down, damaging the threads or going right inside the engine. Now, after you've done that, you want to use a tool something like this to help you get the spark plug boot removed from the spark plug. This tool kind of hooks in underneath the boot and helps you to pop it off, because these boots can really get stuck on the plugs. Now the next thing you need is a special spark plug socket. Inside the socket there's a rubber grommet so that you won't break the plug. You need a series of extensions, and it really is helpful to have a swivel ratchet, something like this, to clear all the obstructions in the engine bay. Now it's also a good idea to make sure that you remove or service these spark plugs with the engine cool or cold. Now this is an aluminum cylinder head, an alloy cylinder head, and we have these on many of today's cars, and most manufacturers suggest that you only perform this operation with a cold engine because it'll reduce the risk of damaging those spark plug threads. Now when we want to reinstall the spark plug in the engine, another tool that's really handy to have is this little rubber hose deal that snaps on the end of the spark plug, and we can guide the spark plug back down into the hole and twist it in with this motion here to help start those threads. Now before we reinstall that spark plug, we're going to use another tool, something like this. This is a tapered gapper, and we'll check the gap on those new spark plugs before we reinstall them, and we'll set it to manufacturer's specs. Now another thing on today's engines that's very important is that you put a little bit of this anti-seize compound on the threads of the spark plug before you reinstall it, and that'll prevent the spark plug shell, which is steel, from seizing in that aluminum cylinder head and damaging the threads the next time you want to take it out. Now we're going to go to another car and show you an even tighter installation than this, where you actually have to partially disassemble one segment of the engine to get at the spark plugs. Now on an installation like this one, this is a straight 6 Toyota Supra engine. You can see that a couple of the spark plugs, particularly the middle two in this engine, are completely covered with machinery. We can get at the first two, no problem, but the middle two, impossible. We have to remove all the intake tract in order to get to them. Now what that means is that it's an awful difficult, expensive job to replace the spark plugs. So what they've done on this particular application is they've used what we call a platinum tip spark plug, similar to the one I've got here. There's a conventional spark plug. You can see the large center electrode in it. On the platinum plug, all you can see really is the porcelain insulator around the center electrode, but you can't see the wire. It's a very fine platinum wire that's used in there. Now a spark plug like this platinum tip plug typically lasts 100,000 kilometers, so it's not necessary to service it very often, and thank goodness, because it's quite a deal to get at it. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 93.
Despite the proliferation of car alarms, thieves continue to prey on automobiles at an alarming rate. In metropolitan Toronto, car thefts were up 24% from last year. But the car theft capital continues to be Montreal, where over 18,000 cars were stolen in 1991. The trouble with most alarms is their sensitivity. It can take a mere bump in a parking lot to set it off. As a result, alarm warnings are usually ignored. Recently, Suzuki Canada gathered some automobile journalists to introduce a new alarm that will be standard equipment in all 1993 models. An alarm that could recognize what a false alarm is and is not.
Basically, we're demonstrating today the new Suzuki Secure system that is standard on all 93 vehicles that Suzuki produced, Swift and Sidekick. We brought the press out to show them the difference between our new system, which is developed in Canada, and the difference between an aftermarket system, say that Alpine offers, high-end, $800, and another manufacturer's OE or original equipment alarm system.
Right now this unit is set up at its most sensitive, so I'll just arm it. And I want someone here to just, rock this car a little bit. Doesn't take much, okay? That's the sort of thing that gets pretty annoying at 2 in the morning.
On the aftermarket system, we had the journalist jumping on the car, bouncing it, rocking it, banging mirrors, banging windows, and the alarm system will go off. But it is a owner adjustable system. So by taking a screwdriver and turning the sensitivity down, the car becomes less prone to going off. So after a while, jumping on the car, rocking the car, would not set the alarm system off. Now that then sent us over to the Suzuki Secure system, which if you rock the car and basically the guys are almost flipping the car over, the system won't go off. And that's basically to cover off parking lot bumps, kids playing around with cars, someone walks by your car and bumps a mirror. You're not going to get a false alarm. And in some places in Canada now, that is an actual law where you can be penalized for having your alarm system go off. We then had them go over to a competitor product and look at their original equipment alarm system, which is activated by infrared. So you've got to stand right beside the vehicle, hit the button to activate it, and basically it's called a perimeter protection system, which means you have to open the vehicle doors. It's activated by the dome light switch. You can then take, as we did, a ball-peen hammer and shatter either window, windshield on the vehicle, and the alarm system will not go off. So valuables left on a seat or a glove box being broken into, you can smash the window all day on one of those and steal what you'd like off the seats. Versus our system where rock the car, bump it, bang the mirrors, nothing happens. As soon as you go to break a glass window, or what we call an intrusive event, where you're trying to slim jim it, pry a door, pry a hood, smash a window to steal the car, the alarm system will go off. And if a thief is brave enough to sort of tough out the minute of the alarm ringing, hop in the car and try and hotwire it, the Suzuki system has a starter interlock, so the car will not start. Right now would be the most technologically advanced system. Very unique. No one else has it. We're offering it standard on all our models for $93. No charge.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns mufflers and exhaust systems. Now there's a couple of things about the Canadian environment that make it very important to do routine inspections on this system. First of all, we've got a large portion of the year where we're heating the inside of the car, so ventilation isn't the best. We've got all the windows closed. Secondly, in most areas of the country we're using road salt, and that tends to accelerate the corrosion on our complete exhaust system and muffler, as well as possibly eating holes in the underbody or floor pan of the car. Now we don't want to end up with a deadly combination whereby we've got holes in the muffler system as well as holes in the underbody of the car, or either situation. So make sure that you have both areas routinely inspected for maximum safety. That's your Midas tip of the week.
I'm here in Detroit, Motor City, and I've been driving British cars. So what am I going to talk about? Japanese cars, of course, in a minute on Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Is the bloom coming off of the Japanese rose? I mean, the last few Japanese cars that have been introduced haven't been particularly popular with the public or with the critics. And now that the Japanese have set the hook with the North American public with this quality image, they're starting to reel those prices in. The other day I was driving a $21,000 Civic and a friend of mine was driving a $23,000 Corolla. Time out, guys, that's too much money. And sometimes I get letters from people who have problems with the Japanese cars and they don't believe it's their own fault. This is something new. Still, the Japanese had a strategy about 40 years ago to become a worldwide player in the car business. And now, with the possible exception of the ultra-luxury and prestige segments, they've accomplished that goal. The other thing that they've done is, particularly for companies like some of the European manufacturers, they've forced them to become more competitive and to improve their quality. So I think on the long run, Japanese presence has been good for the consumer because you end up with a better car. I'm Jim Kenzie.
I mean, let's face it, you can only stand back and admire a car like the Dodge Viper for so long before you gotta get behind the wheel and head for the open road. And I gotta go. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Motoring 93 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.